evening and welcome to, I was going to say, another exciting show, but let's hope so. Well, there's a question, you see, that's baffled people for years, so I better clear this one. I asked the question, what's brown, steams and comes out of cows backwards? So you're probably scratching your heads on that one, and it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's the Isle of Wight ferry. Now, later on, I got a cracking dirty joke, which I'll leave to the end of the program. But tonight, we're going to actually have a look at hair, mutants, and DNA. So there's quite a mix for you. But first of all, what's happening to Jolly Boris, whose lady friend, girlfriend, apparently is a, inverted commas, allegedly a green campaigner. And so I've read today they're planning on taxing motorists by the mile. Really. And so all jolly fun, isn't it? You know, this new world order and all that. But what gets me is the sort of the illusion of governments, and I'm going to bore the crap out of you now. I've always said this, you know, unelected usury scammers rule countries, unelected civil servants run countries, and governments are the Punch and Judy show, or the illusionists who are there to distract people from the first two facts. So it's the reason I don't vote. Now, crumbs, we've got a lot in chat tonight. So what we got here? Hello, Stewie. Now, if you're on Facebook, you won't be able to read these things that are coming up. So come over to YouTube, Eric Von Essex, and you'll be able to see all the stuff coming across the screen. But Stewie has written, love the recordings of your dad, Chris. Can I still buy a copy of his book? Yes, you can. Yes. The book is available from the website. There we go. It's www.warveteran.co.uk. And he's written, he wrote, unfortunately he's passed away now, but he wrote two books. And that was My World War II and The Horrors of D-Day, which was an extract from his main book, which took him 10 years to write. So thanks for that, Stewie. Thank you very much. And we've got Magic J. Hello. Evening, Chris. Well, evening, Magic J, and evening, everybody. Now, where was I? we were saying about what's happened to Boris. Well, I had a phone call this morning from a friend of mine, and he said, have you heard the good news? I thought, what, won the lottery or something? And apparently he reckons that Boris has had to go to court because under common law he's been charged with treason. Well, I don't know. But keep an open mind on that one. But he's disappeared or disappearing for 2 weeks. And let's put it this way. If you reverse everything that comes from official government and what they officially say, you'll be correct more times than incorrect, because governments are not there for you. They're there for their usury scammers. So there it is. And now let's have a look what we've got here, Stewie. I want the main book. Oh, that's good. Thank you very much, Stewie. Well, if you can contact me via email, that's actually on the website, and we'll talk about that after the show. But thank you very much. So I've got a sale there of a book. Hey, very nice. Thank you. My dad's book. Very kind of you. Thank you. Right. Now, if you tune into the Jolly Heretic on YouTube, which is Professor, where is it? I've got it here. Professor Edward Dutton. Always interesting. And he certainly knows his stuff. And I agree with most of what he says. I and I politely and respectfully disagree with some of what he says, but most of the time he's got his finger on the pulse, his finger on the button. Now, on one of his videos, this is secondhand from me, so please go onto his YouTube site. And I found that people interpret things in their own way. And I mean, for example, when I study architecture, I come out of a lecture and you find that people would interpret what the lecturer said in their own way. So I'm interpreting what he said in my way, and it's secondhand from me. So after the show, please go on to the Jolly Heretic. And what, as I say, in my view, and I could be wrong, what he was saying briefly was that society has, in intelligence, reached a peak in around 1870 and has actually declined since then. And the reason possibly for this decline is that the birth mortality rate has gone down, so that more people are being born now that from Darwin selection of the fittest wouldn't have been born around 1800 before the Industrial Revolution. Now it's quite interesting what he says. Now he's a professor, he studied this. I'm not a professor, I haven't studied this. But taking this a stage further, what he's saying is that these mutants that would not have been born now are corrupting society as we go along. It's quite an interesting thought. I mean, I don't believe in eugenics, and I'm not that into survival of the fittest, and I feel sorry for people that are disabled and that, and I think a society does care for its the underdog, shall we say. But look at this another way. Now, I'm going to bring into this several things to think about, okay? Now, I have been looking at trying to find out some scientific information to link. I know that it seems to be a link between, I won't say the word, but I think you can guess what I mean, jabs, shall we say, that they give children and autism. There's a link there. Now, I've got a theory, but I've tried to research into this theory, but I haven't come up with much. So I'm actually, shall we say, politely asking whether the Jolly Heretic could possibly look into this, because you see, if you study a subject, like for example, if you are, say, well, our background is architecture. So if you ask me a question about architecture, I may not know the answer, but I know where I can find the answer. So, you know, you always got your handbooks and things like that. Like if you ask me something about the building regulations, I may not know the answer straight away, but I know where to find the information. Well, it's the same with Professor Dutton. He could find the information a billion times quicker than I can, because he's actually skilled in that area. So it's not necessarily knowing the answer, as I say, it's knowing where you can find the information. Now, going along with what he said about mutants beginning to appear, that's corrupting and, shall we say, corrupted society. Excuse me one moment. I'm wondering whether this cocktail of jabs, shall we say, that children get is actually doing something to corrupt society. Now, stay with me a little bit. Now, to give you some idea of my age, I was born the same year as Mel Gibson. I'm 4 months and 2 days younger, I hasten to add, than Mel Gibson. And so I won't say how old I am, but I was born the same year. And I bet you're going into Wikipedia and saying, well, where's Mel Gibson? Now, as far as I know, all I had was one jab when I was a kid at school, and we had to eat a lump sugar, which some nurse put some shit on or something. You took it, and that was it. And I only remember one jab that I had, and what that was for, I don't bloody know, you know. But as the 60s came along, they started increasing the amount of drugs and in jabs they gave children, and that is steadily increased over the years as the pharmaceutical companies are making more and more money out of it. And I'm wondering whether, I mean, we look at thalidomide, that was what, early 60s, I think it was, that women took, and, you know, there's all people with their white coats saying, oh, it's perfectly safe, perfectly okay. And I've actually seen a thalidomide child, a thalidomide adult, and it greatly upset me. It really did. Poor chap, you know, it was born so disabled. It really did. It choked me. And it must be, when you go against nature, nature actually fights back. And there's something that I noticed in the early 1980s that I wonder if anybody else has noticed this. Now, again, I've tried to find scientific evidence for this, but I can't. But Professor Dutton might be able to. So, again, I've laid the gauntlet down. I was working in a place in the early 80s, and I suddenly noticed people in their, I was in my 20s, in their early 20s, that were born in the, say, from about 1961, so in the early 80s, they'd have been 20, 21, 22, around about that age. They were not all. I noticed a new sort of, let's be blunt, mutant coming out. And I had two experiences of this. Now, I worked in a place, architect's place, and there was a chap there who was, if you wanted proof that zombies exist, he would have been it. He had, excuse my language, have you ever heard of the, what they call it, excuse my language, the piss pot haircut, where they used to put piss pot over someone's head and shave round the back? Well, he had a haircut like that, so it's all sort of, I remember this was the early 80s when people had their hair long, and he was sort of goofy like this, and his eyes, there was no soul there. He was dead from the neck up as his character. And I remember Les, you know, and that was his name. I won't tell where I work, so I won't give the game away. And this chap was sort of creepy because he was sort of like this. And a lot of the people that I worked with, it's quite a big office, would think he was the life and soul of the party. I was old Les here, hello mate, and you'd come in. Don't forget, they said, oh look, there's old pictures of old Les. He got drunk, he was with the women, wasn't he? And there's this picture that I saw, and there's two sort of teenage girls, you know, with booze up like that. And there's this Les going like a propped up corpse. And he was kind of logical. And what I mean by that is that he didn't do things, he couldn't understand logic. Like, for example, it wasn't him that did this, but I'm giving an example. If a door needed to make a paper wedge to wedge it open, he wouldn't know how to do it unless he read the book. And he had a very good memory, and he got through all his qualifications by having a good memory, because the firm I worked for was sending in day release, and that's what they had. They had a scheme where you would go to college for one day and you would work for 4 days, and the firm paid for it. I think it was a government thing that they did in the early 80s. And this sort of corpse, as I call it, or zombie, kind of must have had something in his persona or something which people liked. I couldn't quite get it. And he was sort of just, and I worked late one night and he was working there, and I looked up over the drawing board and he was looking at me, and he really blinked. That's another strange thing. So I thought, funny. Got on with my work, drawing away. A couple of minutes later, this sort of creepy. He looked up and he was still looking. I thought, wow. And it went on. Anyway, another chap in the office said to me one day, he said, "Are you fed up with this, what I call leather pill?" I said, "You've noticed it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "He's dead, isn't he?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I think he's mentally sick, isn't he?" He said, "Well, he doesn't he's just got no personality." And he said, "You look at his eyes, he very rarely blinks. And his eyes were almost black. They were dark. And he said, "Have you found him staring at you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "He's a creepy bastard." And as I was saying, as we were speaking, another bloke piped up and he said, "Yeah, I found that." He said, "There's something bloody odd." Anyway, the chap I was talking to, he was an Indian. When I say Indian, his parents were Indian. He was born in this country. And he said, "Well, I'm going to sod off out of this country." His brother lived in America. And he said, he made a prediction, which turned out to be right. And he said, "Do you realise zombies like that are going to start running this country one day?" He said, "I'm getting out before it starts." And remember, this was the early 80s. And he left. And I was made redundant. Oh, no, sorry, he was made redundant, same as me. And he I don't know whether I think he went to America. Whether he became an American or not, I don't know, but I sincerely hope he did, and I hope he's doing well or did well in America. But that's another story. But he noticed it as well. And then another occasion, there was a secretary who I worked with, and you generally had a sort of drawing office, and you had about one or two secretaries, and she was the same sort of, and she was the same age group. Now, that was the age group that was pumped full of Christ knows what from the pharmaceutical companies. And let's face it, throughout the 60s, they increased the amount of jabs that children had. Now, do you realise that what's in government now is the ones that were born in the 60s and 70s? I mean, all right, he's not in government, but look at Keir Starmer. Now, I personally think that he's dead from the neck upwards. But when you look at him, he's sort of... he looks like the life and soul of a funeral. Absolutely weird, creepy. And when you look at people like Whitty, Andrews Whitty, he doesn't seem the full ticket. And Ferguson. Now, can you imagine 100 years ago, if they would have gone to a government with all their facts and figures? People then were more logical, and they'd say, "Well, hang on a minute, what? You're going to have so many millions dying of this? Get out!" They wouldn't have stood earthly. And I'm wondering whether these sort of mutants, going back to what Professor Dutton said about people being born, these mutants being born that wouldn't have been born because under Darwinist natural selection, they would have been born. And then additionally, and I'm not saying they're all, I mean, there's some great people born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Professor Dunn was born in the 70s, I believe. So, they're not all. I'm just saying some that were susceptible to this. Could it be that this cocktail of muck that these people were jabbed with, shall we say, done something to their brain that's made them sort of, I know, sort of, but they seem to give out something that people don't notice, and only some people do. Could it be that I'm oversensitive? I mean, it's like this secondary. She was dead from the neck upwards. You go over to her and say, excuse me, can you type this report out for me, please? Did you hear what I said? I used to think, bloody hell, it must have been cold this morning when they dug her up. You just sort of, weird. But something I'd look into. So I threw the gauntlet down there, and it seemed to me in the early 80s, and it's just the early 80s I come across this. It seems to have died out. I don't know, but there seemed to be more women than men were like it. Weirdly enough, again, it's odd. There's a secretary. There was an architect I worked with. She was absolutely. She had a memory like a computer. She could memorize anything, but completely illogical. And you would sort of talk to him. She says, "Is it a lovely day? Do you have a nice weekend?" That's what you got. I know there's quiet people, but this was just sort of. But again, people didn't notice it. And I think it was Jenny. Oh, she's a laugh. Oh, Jen, isn't she? Yeah, she's coming down to pub lunchtime, is she? Yeah. I mean, I'm not a boozer. I don't drink or smoke. So I used to go to the pub and have a cup of tea. Yeah, slightly eccentric. And Jenny would be sitting there. Would you like another drink, Jenny? But again, didn't blink much, and her eyes were very, very dark. Weird, isn't it? They were sort of blacky brown. Really weird. Very odd. So something weird there. Now, next subject I'm going on to, which is sort of linked. If you go on to, where are we? I'll get the banners here. Here we go. Now, if you're on Facebook, you won't see these banners. So here we go. So I better read this out as well. If you go on to http / sounds like the incontinent website, doesn't it? / / sorry. truthseeker444.blogspot.com. So that's truthseeker444.blogspot.com, and you look up hair. It's Sandra Barr who's actually done some fantastic research, and what she says about hair is very, very interesting. Now, before I go into hair, I'll have a look in the comments because we've got quite a lot on tonight, and we've got here. Where are we? Hello, Flat Earth. Very nice to speak to you. And we got Maiden DE. And she says, the younger you are, the more jabs you've had generally. That's right. Yeah. So luckily, as I say, I was born the same year as Mel Gibson, so we didn't have so many jabs. And you're wondering, when was that? And by the way, I don't look as old as him because I'm not as old as him. I'm 4 months, 2 days, I think it is, younger. Anyway. And Maiden DE says, my mum got me waived for most of them. None after the age of 4, thankfully. I think my parents were similar. Yeah, I think my parents, they weren't too keen on it. And Maiden DE says, Dutton was born in the early 80s, like I. I think it was 1979, I think. So I don't want to prove you wrong. It might have been 1980, I don't know. And Maiden DE says, just like my colleagues in uni, computer brains but zero personality. That's right. I literally called them computers. They were mostly Asian and thus dark-eyed. Now, the ones I was with were European, but English, but they were very dark-eyed. And, Flat Earth, there's a laugh there. Yeah. So it's weird. It really is odd, and I wonder if anybody else came about this. But it was only in the early I'll get there in a minute, the early 1980s, this seemed to happen. So it's very, very strange. Before I go any further, I'll quickly go over to Facebook, see if everything's going on all right there. Yes, I think I'm going out. Soon find out tomorrow. But what briefly now, what I prefer to, I don't like reading out loads and loads and loads and loads and stuff, paraphrasing it. I like to sort of do a summary and act like a sort of a signpost. So people say, "Oh, I'll go there, I'll have a look at this, and have a look at that." And what she says, if I can find it, here it is. What Sandra Barr says is very, very interesting about hair. Now, the Sikhs, apparently they don't cut their hair, and this is something that was quite interesting. Where are we? That's it. Now, most modern people shave their armpit hairs and slither deodorant which blocks the pores, not realizing that the sweat which naturally trickles down the armpit hairs acts as a wick to draw out the waste products from the body containing viruses, bacteria, hormones, etc., to regulate and keep everything in balance. It is also ignored that 80% of all human breast cancers first occur in the outer quadrant, which is directly below the armpit. So the wisdom of modernity fails to impress me. It is what is called disconnection, an absence of fine-tuned perception of the natural phenomena, and it goes on. So that is rather interesting, and there's a big article about it. Now, when you look at creativity, and as Flat Earthers said, hair today, gone tomorrow. Yes, well, I can't actually. I'm going to give the worst advert in the history of advertising. As you can see, I'm follically challenged. I'm bald. I detest being bald because I used to have my hair down to my shoulders. Believe it or not, I liked long hair. I really think long hair is great. And in women in particular, I think women look fantastic with long hair. And, there are some that have shortish hair and it sort of suits them. But no, most women, however old they are, the longer the hair, the more beautiful I think they look. And I'm, as I say, I'm a long hair fanatic. Now, when I'll just give a quick tip regarding hair. Now, I used to have chronic dandruff and psoriasis, and that's probably how I lost my hair. Also, it was in my genes. My father was bald, and I changed my jeans from Levi's to Wranglers, but it made no difference. Sorry, it's a terrible joke. Anyway, I do not use shampoo anymore. I gave up using shampoo about 5 or 6 years ago. And again, this is not a very good advert, but I have got hair growing, and it's starting to grow more on top. And it does, what is left of it grows incredibly fast now, because I actually mix bicarbonate of soda with honey, and I rub that into my head and leave it for about a couple of minutes whilst I'm in the shower. And then I spray with one of these garden sprayers, one of those hand pump jobbies, 3 parts rainwater, not tap water, rainwater, and 1 part apple cider vinegar over my hair and what's left of it, or shall we say hairs. Rub that in, leave it for about a minute or two, and then rinse off. And I found that when I first did this, my hair felt strange for about a week or two, because I only wash my hair once a week, which you shouldn't do it any longer than that. But then my head never felt so good. Dandruff went, psoriasis went, and what happens is shampoo puts a coating on your hair, and what this apple cider vinegar and honey and bicarbonate of soda does, it takes that coating off, And of course, your hair is then natural. Now, when you look through the ages, look at, say, the Victorian times, especially the 1880s, 1890s, was probably one of the most creative times we've ever had. And I happen to be a lover of Art Nouveau. That's a style of architecture. You either love it or hate it. I love it. And Art Nouveau was only around for a very short period in the late 19th century, up until 1914 in Europe, and then until about 1926, 27 in America. And it's a kind of natural style of things. You look at anything that's Art Nouveau, it looks, most of the time, I mean, there's bad Art Nouveau and there's good Art Nouveau. I mean, if you want to see Art Nouveau, go to Belgium. There's a lot of it around there, and Paris as well. And it's a style of building that, again, I think it was used ahead of its time. I love it. I can't stand Art Deco, but Art Nouveau, fantastic. Now, if you look at Victorian photographs, the men had their hair long. Look at Kingdom Isambard Brudel, long hair. Look at Charles Dickens, long hair. Look at the who was the Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1914. Oh, hang on a minute, let's have a global water, excuse me. Lloyd George. He became minister in 1916. He had long hair. Look at most of the artists and people of that time, they had long hair. Look how creative people were. Now, I've got a picture of my granddad's brother, which was my mother's uncle, and it was taken before the First World War, and he had winkle picker shoes, which people thought came out in the 1960s. No, this was before the First World War. I assume, I don't know, I didn't know a date on it, but because he was in the First World War, must have been about 1913, 1912. He was a teenager at the time, and he's a one for the ladies. And he was stone deaf, but that didn't stop him. And he had two very nice ladies in Edwardian outfits next to him, cheeky. And he had winkle picker shoes, a collarless jacket, exactly the same as the Beatles wore, and longish hair. And if you were to colorise that photograph and said it was taken in 1969, you'd believe it. It's years ahead of its time. But my granddad's brother, he worked in timber. He was a woodworker. I won't say carpenter, because a carpenter just knocks stuff up. A woodworker does precision work, and he made cabinets and chairs and things like that, and he designed them. Very clever man. And my granddad was an inventor. But that's another question. Now, sorry, another story. Now, come the First World War, 1914, men had their hair shaved off to stop them getting lice. And that shaved hair carried on after the First World War. Now, when you look at 1920s and 30s, they weren't that creative, were they? Nothing much changed. And then, of course, the Second World War came along and men had their hair shaved off again. And they kept their hair short until the 1960s, when there was a massive explosion of creativity. But look at men's hair. They wore it long. Could there be something in this? Because there was a report that happened in the Vietnam War. Now, it's 50-50 whether this is a true report or not. I'm on the fence with this one. The jury's out with me. So make up your own mind, okay, on this. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm just going to do a little bit of reading now. And it says here, did Native American scouts' long hair provide almost supernatural tracking abilities during the Vietnam War? And I'll just read this out. It says, the United States military recruited Native Americans as scouts in the Vietnam War, and in the course of their training, the military discovered that long hair actually helps give people almost supernatural tracking abilities. Now it says here, it seems that during the Vietnam War, special forces in the War Department had sent undercover experts to comb American Indian reservations looking for talented scouts, for tough young men trained to move stealthily through rough terrain. They were especially looking for men with outstanding, almost supernatural tracking abilities. Before being approached, these carefully selected men were extensively documented as experts in tracking and survival. Once enlisted, an amazing thing happened. Whatever talents and skills they had possessed on the reservation seemed to mysteriously disappear, as recruit after recruit failed to perform as expected in the field. Some casualties and failures of performance led the government to contract extensive testing of these recruits, and this is what was found. When questioned about their failure to perform as expected, the older recruits replied constantly that when they received their required military haircuts, they could no longer sense the enemy. They had no longer access to sixth sense. Their intuition no longer was reliable. They couldn't read subtle signs as well or access subtle extrasensory information. Hair is an extension of the nervous system. It can be correctly seen as nerves, a type of highly evolved feelers or antennae that transmit vast amounts of important information to the brainstem, the limbic system, and the neocortex. Not only does hair in people include facial hair in men, provide an information highway reaching the brain, hair also emits energy, the electromagnetic energy emitted by the brain into the outer environment. This has been seen in Kirlian photography when a person is photographed with long hair and then rephotographed after the hair is cut. When hair is cut, receiving and sending transmissions to and from the environment are greatly hampered. This results in numbing out. So that is rather interesting. And I just wonder what you think about my theory of when there's long hair in men, there's massive creativity, and when there's short hair in men, there isn't. Now, if you go back, let's say to 1980, 40 years, okay? What's changed since then? Now, computers, yes, have advanced phenomenally. We didn't have the internet in 1980 and things like that. But look at everything else since these loons, shall we say, have been on the scene. Music is bland. Now, the title of this show is I Don't Believe in If Anymore. Do you? Now, I got that from a Roger Whittaker record that he recorded this song, and it's fantastic. It's called I Don't Believe in If Anymore. And it goes, if you load that rifle, son, if you load it right, you know, etc., etc. And what he's really saying is that the establishment tell you if this, if that. Look at the government. If you wear this, and if you do that, and if you do this. And as my uncle used to say about governments, the goodies are always tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. It's always tomorrow. You know, election times, we're going to do this tomorrow, look forward. It's bullshit, complete bullshit. And it's always if you do this, if you do that. If I don't believe in if anymore. Well, I haven't believed in if for years. But what I'm saying, if you go back 40 years, 1980, apart from computers, apart from that, music has gone backwards, it's bland. Comedy is dead, it's bland, people are not funny. There are funny people around, there are comedians around, and there are good singers around, and there's good songwriters around, but they're not pushed to the front. It's the mutants that are pushing the blandness. And look at some of these so-called comedians, new age comedians. I'm sorry to say this, they're mutants. They had the probably when they were kids. No, again, I'm not saying everybody that was born in the 60s and 70s and 80s are mutants. Only some. I'll make that very, very clear. So I've noticed that they seem to be linked with like communism. Now you think about it. If you go back to the 1880s when Karl Marx was around, he wrote Das Kapital, and he was a rampant bloody communist, Marxist. And maybe he wouldn't have been born if he was born in the 1800s. Because as the Industrial Revolution went along, infant mortality decreased. Could he have been one of the first mutants? And you notice communism seems to be followed by mutants. Now, I worked with an English bloke who was one of very, very few Englishmen that actually fought in the Vietnam War. And this was in the early 80s as well. It was just quite interesting. And bloody hell, talk about a dangerous person. We used to have in those days, because remember, go back to the Stone Age in the early 80s, we had drawing boards, you know, those sort of square things that you draw things on. Didn't have CAD, computer aided design, then. Wasn't heard of then. And we had these electric erasers, so that when you drew something, if you were in ink, if you wanted to erase it, you sort of press this thing on and erase what you'd done if you'd made a mistake. Well, they were notorious for blowing fuses. So this silly sod, all he did, he got his knife out, cut the plug off, shaved the wires, 2 matchsticks, and shoved them into the live socket. And apparently he never had plugs in his home. He plugged everything that way. He didn't believe in plugs. How his house didn't blow up. But this is going back to the story. He apparently, this is what he told me, and there's no reason to disbelieve him. He was an electrical engineer, designer, in the early 60s, and he got a contract, was freelance, on an American Air Force base. Now, I think he might have been in the British Army beforehand because he had extensive knowledge of explosives. And the American Air Force got to know this, and he had, as I say, he was a specialist. Now, how an electrical engineer got specialist in explosives, I do not know. But anyway, cutting a long story sideways, he said that they offered him a place in the American forces, and this was before the Vietnam War. Was it commissioned or something? I don't know. Quite a good rank. I don't know whether he did square bashing or anything like that. And he was in his 20s at the time. And that's how he got into the American forces. And apparently he only met one other Englishman, this was in the Vietnam War, who had actually joined the American forces so he could get his university or college paid for by the forces. But that's another story. But what he told me, he was actually at the the Tet Offensive. It was in 1967. And that was when the Americans were driven back by this Tet Offensive. And the North Vietnamese, or Viet Cong, when they went into these villages, they absolutely massacred the people. And then when the Americans drove them back again, they discovered the mass graves and corpses everywhere. And he was amongst the forces that pushed the Viet Cong back. And I think his job was to defuse booby traps. And I don't know whether he set them or not. And he had a false hand. He'd had bits of him blown up. He'd been blown up about 2 times. And when it was wet weather, he sort of creaked a bit. He was quite a character, but he lived life dangerously. I mean, he came from, I worked in Hertfordshire, and he came from somewhere, I think, in deepest Surrey. And he was laid in on a Monday morning because he'd been blowing up trees he had a couple of acres of woodland, and he was blowing up trees with explosives. And he was making such a noise, the police were called in. And he had explosives that he shouldn't have had. This is, but that's him. That was his life. I think he made them. He knew how to make explosives. I don't know, but he was quite a, he was a bit of a loon actually. He was just lived life in the fast lane. You know, he was a boozer, smoker. He just lived life to the full. But what he said, because in those days, you know, I used to believe that Neil Kinnock was a nice man and the Labour Party was marvellous. No. No, I woke up afterwards. As I say, I don't vote. And he sat down one lunch hour and he gave me shall we say, a masterclass in what communism is really about. And he told me what he saw happen in the Tet Offensive. And he said, if you saw that with your own eyes, he said, you'd never be left of centre ever again. And he said, because he said the communists, he said they were just absolutely bloodthirsty. They were psychopaths. They were psycho totally. They had no feelings. He said they massacred, they raped and tortured women, children, anybody. And he said when the Americans, this is, I don't know whether I should mention this. This is what he told me. He said when the Americans captured the Viet Cong, most of them were simpletons, farm lads, you know, who had been totally brainwashed, and they were. And he said you could threaten them with a gun and they weren't phased out by it. He said and the only way you could get information out of them was to take them up in a helicopter. It's terrible. Several of them tied up. And if they didn't answer your questions, you boot one out. Seriously. Then they'd answer your questions. He said that's the only way I could get information out of them. He said they weren't phased by anything, but that's the only thing that did phase them. So it's the only way they could get information out. So, you know, the Americans did some naughty things as well. So let's go into chat and have a look what's in there. Wow, we've certainly got some fantastic comments tonight, and I do apologise if I miss some of you out because you know, now where are we? Now let's have a look. Let's have a look. Oh, we've got Maiden Heat DE. I agree. Especially hate the Soviet-style block-like soulless building. That's right. You think about it. Everything is bland and drab. Look at the 1960s tower blocks. Look at the Soviet tower blocks. No trees. It's just drabness. And you know, now we got here Maiden DE. What about Samson? Oh, you mean Samson? Sorry, Samson. And that's corrected it. Yes, biblical story of Samson, the long hair. It's quite interesting, isn't it? He had his hair long. And when you look at these Indian wise men, they've all got long hair. You know, they don't have Marines haircuts, do they? You know, unlike mine. Actually, I'd love to have shoulder length hair again. But being a bald on top, I look a bit of a freak walking around, wouldn't I? I could have a comb over, couldn't I? Like, drop my old super glue down the side. I don't think anybody would notice. No. Right. Okay. We got Maiden DE again. My dad jokes that his ear hair are antenna to communicate with aliens. And yes, the Maiden DE like Samson and Delilah. Yes, that's a good point. And then we've got Flat Earth that's made it. Oh, we've got more comments here. I've lost you. Where are we? Flat Earth. Where we got? We got Flat Earth says of Nazarite life, which included not drinking nor trimming his locks. A man of tremendous strength. His power was sapped after his lover Delilah cut his hair. Yeah, I remember that when I was at school. We learned about that. Yeah. Maiden DE like the ones in Brooklyn with long sideburns. Oh, now we got here. We got only 80% or so are mutants. Now we got here. What we got? Oh my God! The prior owner of my home did that throughout my house. Also, and sorry, I'll ask you there. Well, probably replied to someone else. Right. Now we've got Paul Craven's answer. Said the electrical circuit in your home can enable an eavesdropping technique called Van ECK, and I'll have to I can't pronounce this, Phreaking, which is Phreaking. Check it out. I certainly will. Thanks, Paul. Yes, that's a very, very good point. Now we got here Richard Kinzit. Hello, Richard. I haven't seen you before. Mary's appearance in Fatima, Portugal, 1917. Russia will spread its errors. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Yes. I've heard quite a bit about Fatima. That's quite, I'm sort of interested in these things. But for example, I personally think that a lot of these protest groups are fake. They are, shall we say, part of the illusion. Because I'll leave you on this note. Have you noticed that when people are protesting, they say, the earth, things are, there's a spiritual awakening. Really? Yes, things are, people are more wide awake. Really? Is that true? Well, I'll let you into something. The hippie movement, which started, in the 1960s, all groovy and far out, was, if you do your research, the brainchild of the CIA. And the CIA that had been heavily infiltrated by the Frankfurt School that had relocated from Germany in 1930 to America. That was a communist think tank, and also the former Soviet Union, who did their work infiltrating the American security systems and also infiltrating universities. So the hippie movement isn't what we think it was. Yes, it was all nice with peace and love and all this, that, and the other, pretty flowers into rifles and that. Yeah, but there was an American president that had a great slogan, and it was the first Roosevelt, not the Roosevelt of the 1930s. It was the one, I think, around the First World War. And he said he believes in speaking softly and politely, but with a bloody great stick. But not exactly in those words. In other words, yes, but you have strength. You speak from strength. And whenever you see these protest groups, don't do this, do that, nobody says, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do to stop all these problems? Nobody has any solutions, do they? It's all this, and I think we've grown, and I think I'm going to be booted off of YouTube for this. We've got men that are feminized and women that are made masculine now. I mean, when you look at the men that went over the top with the First World War, they wouldn't sod about, would they? They were tough guys. My dad, he went in on D-Day, and I remember him saying that, he was one of the first landing craft, was the first assault, and he said you could actually hear on the front of the landing craft, it was like a big metal ramp at the front, the bullets going ting, 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 bang, bang, ricocheting off the front of the landing craft. And when the ramp went down, he said it was just lines of tracer bullets going everywhere, and he went straight into deep water, which probably saved his life, and almost drowned. And then when he got ashore, there was tracer bullets flying, and somehow they missed him. Didn't miss everyone, but they missed him. That's guts, isn't it? When you come to think of it, I think we've got a generation of no, I won't say Nancy's, shall we say? Oh, wussies. Let's think about it. It's very nice putting pretty flowers down rifles. But what are you going to do to change things? Because the only way of changing something is to cut the head of the snake off. And the head of the snake is usury. Once you've done away with once you've actually got the usury scammers, their power is lost. They're gone. Because it's a usury scam which is creating all these problems. If you don't know what usury is, look at one of my earlier videos or look it up. So you got to cut the head of the snake off. And, and I'm getting fed up with, it's nice to say peace and love and, all this, that and the other. But to me, it's like attacking a Panzer tank with a feather duster. You know who's going to come off better, right? Don't you? But if you attack a Panzer tank with a big great Churchill tank, then you got You got a different outlet. I'm not a violent person. I'm totally. I'm very peaceful. I'm very much a pacifist. I don't believe in hurting or harming anybody. But unfortunately, when you're up against psychopaths who are not, I don't believe, human, and if you think I'm talking out the back of my neck when I say that, just look up Dr. Hare, who's one of the leading researchers into psychopaths, and he's come, in my view, very close to admitting that psychopaths are not human. Now, hang on. Right, we've got a few more in chat. We've got, hey, it's the Urban Stealth Campervan Man. Hello, nice to speak to you. And yes, I've got on his website from the Dobbs Weir, was it the Dobbs Weir Turd Watchers Society? People that watch the open sewer at Dobbs Weir, the turds of the rich and famous floating past. He's got a good sense of humour. Right, we got Maiden DE, government-funded protest groups like Antifa. That's right, Black Lives Matter. And I go a little bit further. I won't mention any names, but there's some people that, you know, saying this is terrible, this is, they're pointing out what's bad. They're not giving any solutions. The only solutions they're giving is we got to have this mass awakening where we look up into the sky and everything's beautiful and love. Yeah, I'm all for that. But is it going to change things? Nope. Are the usury scammers still be there? Yes. So you've got to cut the head of the usury scammers off. Metaphorically, I mean to say. Again, I'm not a violent, I don't believe in violence. Right, now what we got here. All counterculture is controlled opposition. This is from Paul Craven. The coincidence that most of the hippie culture had connections, this is a good one, yeah, to naval intelligence is outstanding. That's right. Now, I haven't got time to look it up, but I think it was one of the pop groups. His father was in the Navy and was in the Bay of Tonkin incident, which was in 1964, which was the trigger of the first war, the Vietnam War in 1964, not First World War, and the US military have admitted it never happened. And they plastered all over the newspapers in America that the naughty North Vietnamese had attacked an innocent American ship in international waters, and what a terrible outrage, we've got to go into Vietnam and kill these nasty people, but it didn't happen. So there it is. And yes, it was Theodore Roosevelt. Thank you, Maiden DE, who said that. That was it? Speak politely and calmly, but with a big stick. That's right. And Maiden DE, everything reversed. That's right. If you reverse everything that the government says, you'll be correct more times than incorrect. Seriously, on the law of averages, you will be more correct. And people become too comfortable. That's right. Yes. And it's Magic J. That's right. It was the Doors, wasn't it? It's that bloke who croaked it, wasn't it? Didn't show off in at the age of 27. Because what was actually one of my favourite films, but a very good film, is Apocalypse Now. I think it was a very, very skillful film. And there's something at the beginning so hypnotic about that with, is it Martin Sheen? When he was, excuse my language, pissed out of his brain doing all this thing. And that music, the end, that was absolutely perfect for that film. And they reckon that Martin Sheen was actually slightly pickled when he did that. I don't know, allegedly, shall we say. Now we've got Maiden DE, not human, they are aliens or demons, or what, in your opinion? That's a good point, Maiden DE. I would like to speak to a chap that Mark Windows had on his program, and I can't pronounce his surname, where he was talking. He worked in the prison system, and he was looking at people that hear voices, and he thinks it's a genuine situation because he's spoken to people that are scientists that have heard voices in their head, like demons. And it's very, very funny or strange that if you look at different societies in the world, you look at the tribes, okay? Go to Amazon, Papua New Guinea, parts of Africa. They've all, to a certain extent, have a belief in spirits. I mean, if you go to the Solomon Islands, for example, so I had a girlfriend once that was an anthropologist, so she told me like this, and you meet the, I say natives, the people there, they will come at you and you think they're going to attack you, and all this. You think, bloody hell. No, they're doing that as a compliment. What they're doing, they're frightening evil spirits away, and they're doing that to help you. It's a welcome inside to show that you're welcome into their village, but they've got to shoo away the evil spirits. And I think it's a chap called Kowinski, something like that, who's looked into this. I want to have him on the program, actually. I think it'd be a very interesting program because he really knows his stuff. But I do believe there is entities in different levels of consciousness, because out of all the mammals, we are probably the deafest and the most blind. Because when you look at dogs, some dogs, you know, see them, they're going and they're watching something that you can't see. They can hear things that you can't hear, and they can smell things that you can't smell. And I feel sorry for dogs, especially after I've had Brussels sprouts. It must be terrible for them. And there's Eamon Pudama, Jim Morrison, yes, of the Doors. That's right. And we've got a really clever bunch in chat tonight. Yeah, it's Jim Morrison. You know, this is the end. Actually, that was, I can watch that time and time again. I happen to be also a Wagner enthusiast. That bit with the helicopter, right? They actually did that, apparently, you know. But it was terrible, you know, the amount of killing that went on. And Frank Zappa, yes. Always about those connections, that's right. Jerry Mowinski, that's it. Jerry Mowinski, a brilliant bloke. I hope I can get him on this program. I mean, pretty high profile. I don't know whether I'll be able to, but it'd be cool, wouldn't it? Because I'd like to have a word with him. And it's worth looking that up on Mark Window's program, Jerry Mowinski. Very interesting. Whew, he don't half know his stuff. And got there. Yes, he will be an interesting guest. That's Magic J. And we got Paul Craven. I lived in the Solomon Islands in the 90s. Very interesting. Many customs and ceremonies. Beautiful place. Cool. That must have been nice living in the Solomon Islands. Anyway, I better draw this to a close. And I'll give you the dirty joke. All right. So let's say if there are sensitive people around, put your fingers in their ears. And if you've got any thickos around that would misinterpret the joke or not understand it, give them an obedience muzzle to play with. That I'm sure they'd be happy going around the shops wearing that. Anyway, old farmer boy, village idiot. Okay, he's a village idiot. Walking around the farm, bent over, war, war, war. The old farmer goes, "What's the matter with you, eh?" He goes, "War, he's got his hard on, like, you know, war, you know, he's got a stiffy in the old pants, like, you know." He said, remember, he's a village idiot. So the farmer said, "Oh, what you want to do, son?" He says, "Go into the barn." He says, "Drop your trousers." He said, "Get 2 handfuls of nice steaming cow shit and climb at each side of it." He said, that do the trick. So, so he walks into this barn, you see, drops his trousers, he gets 2 handfuls of cow shit, he's just about to clap and each side of his what's it, and in walks the dairy maid, and she says, "What are you doing?" She's a bit simple. "What are you doing?" So he explains. So she's, "Oh no, you don't want to put it there." So she drops her drawers, lifts up her skirt. She says, "You want to shove it up there." So he did, both handfuls. So anyway, on that note, I'll just read out a few of your comments before I go. Thanks, Chris. Good night. That's from Emma. And then we got Maiden DE. Definitely innate architectural belief. Sorry, got the wrong teeth in. Definitely innate archetypal belief in spirits across cultures. I personally believe in aliens, BC. I believe I've communicated communicated with them telepathically. Interesting. I'd be interested to find out more. And then we've got here, but maybe they are spirits. I don't know. Just my best guess. Well, my view about UFOs and aliens is that I do believe that the authorities hype it up and use it to their advantage. I think that anything coming from another galaxy would not use ships or craft to propel themselves. They would know how to do it by space-time, and they would probably are amongst us without us really knowing it. Maybe they are the spirits. But I do believe, possibly, I won't say believe, I've got a theory that the silver objects, flying UFOs that we're seeing, maybe our future that have discovered the secret of time travel and are popping back to see us. Just a thought. And could alien greys be the result of all these mutations that they're making? Could they be the several evolutionary steps from the brigade? Who knows? Well, on that note, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Got Peter's and remember to subscribe, ding that little bell, ding 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 ding. It doesn't cost anything. And join me next week. You never know, I'll try and get Jerry Mowinski on next week. See if I can. I hope so. That'd be a good show, wouldn't it? So thank you very much to everybody in chat, and good night, and join me at 8 o'clock UK time next Monday. Have a good week and good night.